All right, so let me share my screen once more. All right, so let's start off with a little bit of WordPress news and events. Like I said, it's February, so things are a bit slow. But one thing that did come up recently, and you could read a lot more details into the metrics here, is if you go to wordpress.org and look at the news tab. The recent 2023 WordPress survey, which hopefully all of you participated in and filled out, the highlights of that have been posted. And I plucked out a couple of things of interest. And Peter, certainly, if you've read that as well, I can chime in on some of these or other things you saw of interest. But just a couple of things to call out from that survey. Seems like overall awareness of and use of the block-based features is up, which is a good thing. So I think people are getting accustomed to both the block editor and a lot of the block-based features that are coming out in the WordPress releases. Is a positive sentiment. Here's, I guess, the worrying trend, though. It's a positive sentiment about WordPress is down a little bit, and especially among contributors. I personally am not a contributor to the WordPress code or WordPress core, so I can't speak to the specifics around that. But I guess that's something that they need to keep an eye on a bit and just make sure they understand the root causes of that. The other good thing is, again, we've been doing this long enough where we saw the beginning of the block editor, formerly known as Gutenberg, still sometimes known as Gutenberg. But from the survey, people who responded, at least around 60% of respondents indicated that they use Gutenberg. 8% unsure, 12% something else, or the classic editor. So that's a good thing. That's gone up from 54% who responded the year before. So, and I think we kind of hear that here again. Maybe it's just our echo chamber of those of us who come to meetups, but it seems like most people who join have at least tried the block editor. Again, your mileage may vary on how much you use it, but at least I think people are aware of it. And then again, 63%, it's a good or better than other content management systems, which went down a little bit. So maybe some of this doesn't speak necessarily so much to WordPress getting any worse, but maybe those other content management systems. And again, that I'm not sure what they fit into that broad term, if that includes things like Squarespace and Wix, those kind of things. Again, those, you got to admit, I don't know, people who watch, I don't watch a lot of live sports on TV anymore, but you see a lot more commercials for Squarespace and Wix on, national TV than you do I ever saw, for WordPress. I don't think I've ever seen a WordPress commercial. So it could be some of that too, I think, driving awareness to it. And just a couple last ones too, and then I'll shut up. And Peter, if there's other ones that you feel like bringing up from the survey, but so what are some of the concerns that people have? And again, I don't think this is specific to WordPress right now. It could be the sites that they're working on. You have too many plugins, site editing experience, security, performance, those kind of things. And then I guess we definitely noticed this because we've tried this too. And I'm looking at all of you, and I just asked you for some input here, but survey burnout, I get it. It's like, now you get surveys for every stupid thing in the world now. So here's yet another survey. So, maybe that's affecting as well too. So in terms of, the declining satisfaction rate. So I think one of the things that they've talked about and again, I have some thoughts on this too, again, I mentioned echo chamber, but they're thinking about increasing awareness of the survey, really by emphasizing it more at things like, actually it's not this point here, but really emphasizing maybe gathering more survey results when people are engaged, like these kind of meetups or word camps, things like that. So maybe get more people giving their opinion then. But again, I think that just goes back to what we talked about in our meetup even last month of increasing awareness of all the things that are available for people in the WordPress community, which they might not be aware of, like WordCamps, Learn WordPress that we discussed a lot last month. So anyway, lots in the survey. If you're interested in reading a bit more, there's a link below. Again, easiest way to get to it is really go to wordpress.org and look for news. Peter, anything that you saw from it that jumped out?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is I actually went to the Make team, and there was a comment, and there was a note about NPS, and I'm like, we need to let people know what NPS is, which is basically that measurement of you always get that question from in customer service surveys. Would you recommend blank? Would you recommend WordPress to somebody? So it's kind of that rating. We definitely for years, without getting into too great depth, I've been kind of a little bit of a student of surveys, and surveys are need to be very specifically written, and often aren't, especially when it's not done without a professional in mind, and that skews things. So I always take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to some of the numbers, or when it comes to like these tiny, percentage scales right now. If I were to kind of summarize where I think and take the temperature from both surveys and just kind of paying attention to the community at large, is that we've got, and we run into this right here, but WordPress has a big challenge of having so many personalities, so many ways to do things. I keep coming back to kind of a statement of its greatest power is its greatest weakness. You can do anything, which means the competitors who are in a closed environment says this is how you do it, and then you can, hey, I know how to do it, and we're like, oh, there's so many ways to do it, and that kind of works against us, and that comes out sometimes in the surveys where the questions kind of lead somebody to say, I don't know if I would use it. It's confusing now, and
Right.
things like that. So that's probably the general temperature taking on things. And I think, paying attention to how we communicate things and how we respect people in different levels of not only involvement with the tools we're using. I think we try to do that this meetup. I try to, for sure. So yeah, it's a big giant thing filled with a whole lot of volunteers, also sponsors and companies, and because of all of those things, it can come off as a bit of a little bit of chaos sometimes, a little bit, but again, the greatest strengths are the greatest weakness. The number of people who are working on this is fantastic. The open source nature is fantastic, but that comes at a bit of a price. So
I agree. Yeah, so again, I think it's of interest to see how they try to address some of these things. I assume there'll be more discussion about of this throughout the year. And I'm curious to see even the survey itself, how it's evolving. I've, again, a lot of you have probably learned that too. You try to do surveys these days and it's a struggle. So how else do you gather that feedback? So more to come. I think we'll hear about this, like I said, in the coming year. And real quick on this, because I think we might develop an entire meetup potentially, Peter, to this next month. We didn't talk about this yet, but the timing seems right.
yep.
Coming soon, WordPress 6.5 coming out March 26th. A lot of cool stuff. We'll actually talk a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about some features in it in tonight's presentation, just to give you a preview. But from the team that's releasing it, it says this year's first major release will add finesse and fine tuning to how you control your site building experience, with lots to explore specifically for developers. So I think there is a lot in there for developers, but I think they always bury the lead. I think there's a lot in there for regular users of WordPress. So more to come on that. Again, hopefully next month. Our meetup should be prior to the 26th. So we may devote that whole thing to exploring the more interesting features of 6.5. All right, tool or plugin spotlight.
First thing in the news thing, in
Yep.
case it affected anybody, and it kind of touches a little bit on the concern about, interesting enough, on the echo chamber concept of things. If anybody ran into an issue where they uploaded a theme or a plugin on a site from a zipped file and it didn't crash your site, but it wouldn't load, and it had I can't remember the actual 2-word "it didn't work" message that came back. That is a thing that exists since the latest sub-release of WordPress, the whatever point version it was, I can't remember. What that is that any anything that any plugin or theme that was zipped on a Macintosh, that then you're uploading the new version can't use that zip file. So first of all, know that it's a known thing, and then the solutions there's a little funny one. If nobody's run into that problem here, then don't worry about it. If you have, there's different methods. I ran into the problem because I had premium plugins that were saved on my PC, that came from the vendor, and they must have saved them a certain way, which have worked all the time. And all of a sudden now they weren't working. Things from the repository should be working fine. It was mainly things that you might have been uploading. So that is I don't know, Ray, did you run into that at all?
No, it was surprising because I use a Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing is, I use a Mac. It really was the origin of the zip file.
Okay, yeah. If you re-zipped it or something, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it caused like web hosting companies were given, they were getting more calls with people just saying, hey, something's not working and all. So, all right. So you see my screen?
Yep.
So my tool, my tip, and I don't think I mentioned it last time because I've only started using it, is yet another AI tool. So we're gonna artificial intelligence is going to be something. I don't know. Has anyone used perplexity.ai? So perplexity.ai is a handy little tool. It is somewhere between a chat GPT and a Google. And what I really like about Perplexity AI, first of all, you could just go to Perplexity AI. There's no, just use it. Use it like you would use Google. There is a pro version that gives you more, probably more queries and faster. And I haven't even bothered to look into it because it works. But what's nice about Perplexity AI is that when you ask it a question, you can ask it a question in that prompting kind of thing that we were talking about kind of before the main call started, but very conversationally. What Perplexity does is it returns the answer, but it also returns sources of where it got the answer, which is very handy. Artificial intelligence, gets this reputation of what they call hallucinating, where you get an answer that it says, here's the answer. And then you go, no, that's not the answer. That is not truthful. But what's kind of nice about this, this Perplexity tool is that you can get some of the sources. Now, based on this quick conversation we had with Gene today. Oh, hang on. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go here and I'm going to put in this question. And it's, hey, can you provide me with some information on 508 compliance and accessibility? Specifically, I'm interested in what organizations and what government levels must be 508 compliant. I just wrote this off to the side a few minutes ago. I don't know what the response is going to be, but when you hit enter, it just gives you this kind of this answer, and then you can start asking questions from there. You can expand on it, but then you can go into where it got its sources of information and things like that. So it's sort of a sourced chat GPT kind of thing. And then, you can expand on any one of the questions and just have this conversation with this tool that is scanning the internet. So I did coding with Perplexity AI, just like I've mentioned before in the past with chat GPT. You can kind of say, oh, that code didn't work. Can you help me fix it? Things like that. So it's pretty cool. Play with it, experiment with it, see if you can get some answers to some of your questions where you get some details.
Very cool.
Yeah, let me
Thanks,
see.
Peter.
Now I'm going to ask the one last question. And then once you're having the conversation, you don't have to keep wording it because it knows what you're talking about, just like a lot of the and there you go. So there's an answer and so on. But anyway, yeah, Perplexity AI.
Awesome. We had a hand raised. DK,
Yep.
put it in the chat if you don't mind.
Yep.
And while DK is doing that, are you using the free version?
Yeah, I am.
Like free.
Free as in no cost to me.
That's the thing we talked about, I think, when we discussed a bunch of these AI things. Right now, it's the Wild West, like it is for a lot of things. So enjoy it while you can. There are a lot of things for free because they want you to be the beta tester or their tester. So grab it while you can. All right, let's jump in. Thanks, Peter. Oops, where did my window go? Oh, I hate when this. Come on. There we go. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen okay?
Once I unmute, I can say.
I see people needing. Yep, I see people nodding. Excellent. All right, so sorry, I gotta move this Zoom window. Come on, get out of the way. So welcome again. Our topic tonight: building beautiful websites quickly with patterns, and hopefully all those things will be true. Definitely the patterns part. We'll see about the beautiful part. That's your mileage may vary. So real quick, we'll do some introductions. I'll talk a bit about the behind the scenes nitty gritty of what are these pattern things, specifically block patterns is what we're discussing, and how do you create them. And then Peter's can go into, what I think is more interesting, or equally interesting practical thing of how do you find these community-made patterns? So beyond ones you can make, we'll talk about that. And how can you quickly build a page using those patterns? I think that's going to be really neat. So we'll try to split our time, but I want to give Peter a bit more time. So I think that's the cool part. Then we'll do some, excuse me, then we'll do some wrap up as well. So real quick about myself, I'm Ray. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Hartford WordPress group. I've been in IT 25 plus years as a developer, software architect, worked for some big companies. I've been using WordPress for 7+ years, but self-employed now. I have my own business, doing website development, married, no kids. I live in Newington, Connecticut, and I am a geek. And Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Ingersoll. I've been doing this for quite a long time. Very fortunate to have been working for the Hartford Current, which is the major newspaper in Connecticut, although newspapers have changed quite a bit since I worked there. I've been using WordPress for well over 10 years. Somewhere between maybe 13, 14, I have to double check. I love teaching it. I love talking about it. I love helping people. I'm a self-proclaimed DIY advocate. So for the folks who are just, who are working this on themselves, love to help. And I live in South Windsor, Connecticut, and I'm married with 2 adult children and 3 cats.
All right, so let's dive into, again, tonight's topic. Let's start off with, when we talk about patterns, what do we mean? So we're specifically block patterns. And I'll do some quick demos on these a little bit later, but let's start with some definitions here. So hopefully people are familiar with blocks in WordPress. So the block editor, which we talked about earlier, formerly known as Gutenberg. It's really that visual editor that's built into WordPress that you use now to create pages and posts. So what are patterns? Block patterns are a way to group together certain blocks to create reusable layouts and page sections. So not even just a small, part of a page. You can actually, make a pattern out of an entire page. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. So as I said, they could be as small as a single block. If you want a reusable block, which could make sense in certain situations if you styled it a particular way, let's say a button, etc., or even as large as a full page layout. The neat thing about these patterns, though, is that they also can be part of other things. So some of this goes into full site editing, which probably won't have a lot of time to look at today, but the idea of full site editing is things like templates and template parts. So a template part, for example, maybe your header or footer, things like that. So inside of those as well, you can create block patterns or use block patterns. And the thing is, just like the Russian nesting doll, you can create patterns within patterns and make block patterns out of those. So to your heart's delight. I assume there's some limits there, but and the neat thing is when you create these patterns, you can also group them together under categories. Just the idea of taxonomy. So if you're familiar with creating blog posts, you can say blog post is part of some category. You can do the same things with patterns as well, and that's just so you can find them a little bit easier. The other neat thing too, and I'll show some examples of this today, at least from a theme standpoint, is if you're using a theme, a block-enabled theme, they may also come with custom patterns. And Peter will talk a bit more about user-created ones online. So this is a neat idea of sharing, so beyond what you could just do yourself. And some of these concepts, just real quick, again, if people have used page builders like Divi or Elementor, they call it something different, but it is kind of taking the idea of these reusable components. I forget Divi calls them, like it is in the Divi library, that kind of thing. But that's basically what block patterns are trying to do. Some other interesting concepts before we dive into some show and tell. This idea of synced versus non-synced patterns, and there's another variation I'll talk about in a second too. But this is the idea that once you've created this pattern, the way people use it is the same, these synced or non-synced. So if I'm creating a page and I insert this pattern, that behaves the same. The difference is what happens after you've inserted it into your page. So let's say I then go back and say, hey, I want to change something with that non-synced pattern. Well, if you want to change something, let's say you're changing the styling, you want to add something to that pattern. Well, the problem is because it's not synced, you need to go back and find where you've used that. So think of this as like a stamp, if you will. So you have to find all the places where you've stamped that pattern on different pages and posts, and you have to individually update those because again, it doesn't keep those changes in sync with your actual pattern layout. So think about non-synced patterns, kind of like, again, that stamp idea. Once you insert them, you can't tell the difference from any other blocks in your page. And again, I'll show an example of this later. They look like regular old blocks. Synced patterns, on the other hand, the neat thing about them is if you go back later and change the pattern, it will apply that change across any instances of that. So any place you've used that sync pattern on pages or posts, those changes will be applied to that pattern. So the other neat thing about them too is visually, when you're looking at a page or post that's using a synced pattern, you'll notice that it shows you that thing in a different color. It even has the pattern name on it. So it's visually, you can tell that, hey, this is something a little bit different. So again, I'll show an example of that in a second. And kind of the final one coming up very soon, and I'll do a quick demo of this, hopefully I have time for this, is the kind of the best of both worlds, I really think, synced patterns with overrides. So coming in WordPress 6.5, hopefully it stays on track, is this idea of, you can take something like a global synced layout and style it, et cetera, but allow some variation in the instance of it. And again, I'll show this example of, I'll create a pattern that allows the person who uses that pattern, inserts it to their page, to change a portion of it. For example, an image. Let's say the pattern, the one I'm going to do in my example, is going to have like an image in there. So when the person uses it, they can swap out the image that the pattern had. Think of this as like these pieces are almost placeholders. These are like placeholder things that when you use the pattern, you can then say, oh, here's what I really want for my content. So again, the nice thing is the person who creates the pattern, they get to decide which parts of the pattern can be changed. So it's really neat. We'll take a look at an example of that. Again, I'll get off the slides in 1 second, but so when did this magical thing start? Well, back in WordPress 6.3, you can create block patterns directly in a page or post using the block editor. When you're thinking about creating a pattern, maybe I jumped over this a little bit. I think Peter will talk about this too. Like, it's the why. Why would I do this? Well, because I probably created something, laid out something on a page, whether it's a section or something larger, and I want to reuse it. You can imagine pages on your site just for consistency's sake, for ease of use, for speed. We'll talk a little bit, this whole thing's about creating things quickly. Once you've created that perfect hero section, that perfect whatever it is section, why recreate the wheel? Why not at least save it so you can use it later on? So the suggestion is that when you have multiple blocks you want to create into a pattern, rather than just selecting all these blocks individually, you can put them on a container or put them into a container, something like a group block. And again, I'll show that example when I'm doing the demo. That just lets you keep things together, rather than having them as individual blocks. And then I'll show some examples of how you edit these patterns. So if you're using an older theme, and that's what I'll start with, a non-block enabled theme, you manage the block patterns inside of the options menu. And again, I'll show that in a second. And if you're using a newer theme, a block theme, it's under the full site editing. That's where it's moved now. So patterns are actually there as an option, and that's where you can edit ones or copy them or you delete them as well. So I'm almost done with slides, I promise. So just again, real quick things to keep in mind, and again, we will have access to these slides after the presentation, is as I said, themes or plugins can include patterns with them. So any patterns that you create, you can edit, copy, delete, do whatever you want with them, but you can't do that for themes or patterns that come for themes or plugins, which makes sense. If you want to make edits, what you can do is copy one. You can duplicate any existing pattern. It doesn't have to be one that you created. Then it becomes a user-created pattern. Then you can manipulate it. But just remember, now you've sort of forked something. Now it's separate than its parent. Some other just kind of quirks too. If you delete a synced pattern, there's some quirks to it too. It won't show on the page, but on the back end you'll still see it. It looks a little bit weird. A really neat thing too, and I'm not sure if you're going to touch upon this as well, Peter, when we talk about community ones, but you have the ability to export and import patterns, individual patterns, as just JSON files you can download. So that's really neat. Again, this idea of reuse. Let's say you've styled something, you've saved it as a pattern, that's awesome. You can reuse it on that site, but you also can export it and import it to another website and use that same pattern there. So that's an excellent idea for building like a library, if you will, of different patterns that you want to use on your sites. Just again, some real cautions too. You can use non-core WordPress blocks. I probably won't have time for an example of that. So imagine you're mixing the core WordPress blocks with something like a WooCommerce block or something like a Cadence block. You can do that. You can create patterns, but when you export them, if you want to import it to another site, you need those plugins installed for any of those blocks to actually work. Otherwise, it's just going to say, hey, I don't know what this thing is. And again, this themes can register patterns. If I have a second, I'll show you what that looks like. There's a new folder created for them. And that might be my last one of my slides. Okay, let me start showing a little bit of creating. I'll start with something simple. And again, I'm going to treat, let's see, it's 6:36. I'm going to try to keep mine to like 10-ish minutes. See how well I can do. So just, again, context is always very important. So I'm starting with this, my demo site. I use this a lot for these meetups. And right now I'm using the old 2021 theme. So this is a classic theme. It's not a block enabled theme. So what I mean by that, for example, is it has a customizer still to do things. So let's look at what do patterns look like in this case. I am using the Gutenberg plugin, so that your mileage may vary. Some things on here, because I also have the beta version installed to show some variations later. So anyway, but let's start off with a really simple case here. I have a blank page, and just for time's sake, I think I've already added some blocks in here. So far, nothing special, right? This is just a page. I have the outline view here. So let's say for some reason that these three things, this heading, this quote, and this table, are something I want to reuse elsewhere in the site. So in the classic theme, and actually, I'm sorry, even in the non-classic theme, you can just select the pieces that you want to create a pattern on. So I could individually select these three things all together, and then again, I held down the Shift key, select them all, and at this point, I can click and say create a pattern out of them. That's one way to do it. Another thing, if you're considering bundling these together, because logically they make sense as a group, I would say first you probably want to just throw them into a group container. Now, why would you want to do that? Because now, again, just from an editor's standpoint, they look as if they're grouped together. You get additional styling you can do to things as a group. And anyone who uses the pattern now can also do things at a group level as opposed to individual level. So it's more of a best practice, not something required. So at this point, I've got these three things. So again, what's in the group? It's a heading, it's a quote, and it's a table. And I want to turn this group into a pattern. So let's start off by, we're going to create a pattern. I'm going to call it, I just want to keep these things straight. So let's say Tuesday pattern synced. So this one we're going to create. Here's the simple synced or non-synced. Well, let's create as non-synced first, because that's probably the simpler one. Non-synced. Again, you wouldn't want to name something silly like this. So it's a non-synced pattern. I create it. So at this point, because again, it's a non-synced pattern, it's unsynced. I don't see anything on this particular page. So how do I know, or how do I then edit this pattern? Let's say let's use it once. Let me start with that. So let's start another page. Sorry, let me update this first. I'm going to create a brand new page. WordPress. I'll add new page. I'll call this. I have so many pattern tests. Sorry, pattern test 3. And at this point now, if I want to, normally you can either add blocks through this or add blocks through the block inserter. So at the block inserter standpoint, you have this patterns tab. So in the patterns tab, what I want to see, that one I created, that's under my patterns. So here's the one I created, Tuesday pattern non-sync, this kind of silly name. So once I click on it, again, I got to see a preview of it first, which is neat. Now I've inserted it into the page, and as I mentioned before, this is a non-synced pattern. So what that means, one thing you notice right away is I can't even tell at this point that this was a pattern. Once I save this page and somebody else, let's say Peter, picked this up and edited on it, he would have no way of really tracing back the fact this was a pattern, which is fine. Again, these are the stamped ones. And I can manipulate things. So here's the other piece. If I change this and say, I don't need that heading. The heading's redundant. Let me remove that, et cetera, et cetera. It's only changing this instance on this page. The pattern itself, if I can reuse that pattern over and over on other pages and nothing will change. Well, what if I do want to now modify that unsynced pattern? How do I do that? In a non-block theme, these classic themes, the way that you edit your patterns is you go to these three dots and the options, and you go to manage patterns. And this is going to say leave the site. That's fine. So here you have this page, which I don't think you normally can get to, but you probably can. I'm sure there's a back way to get here. But here are all my patterns. So here's that non-synced pattern. At this point, I'll talk about the duplicate and other things in a second. But at this point, if I want to edit a non-synced pattern or a synced pattern, I'll show an example of that in a second. I can go edit in here. And let's say, okay, now I've determined that nobody wants the heading thing, so I remove it. I've updated my non-synced pattern, but any place I've used this on other pages, that won't be reflected. Going forward, anyone else who uses this pattern to insert, now they'll have this new updated version. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's not synced to anything where it's been used. Let me do one quick one on a synced pattern. I think it's obviously pretty obvious what a synced pattern is, but let's go back to our pages again, all pages. I'll do that same one-ish. This is other patterns. Let's make it something simpler. Let's use this columns thing up here. So this is the cats, and there's a, what is it? There's an image on one side, there's a heading, etc. So let's say this is the thing. Again, it's already part of a group, so I'm not going to throw it into another group. And then I'm going to create a pattern. This time I'm going to say Tuesday pattern synced. We're going to keep the synced part on, and let's create this. Okay, so now it's a synced pattern. So here's the first thing you notice. It already has that visual indicator. So this is purple, I guess. I'm kind of colorblind-ish, purpley. So, and it has a little icon next to it too, and the name of the pattern. So it really tells you right off, hey, there's something special going on here. And one thing that's different too is as any instance of it, they also have the option to go edit the original. So that's one way to go and edit the pattern. You still can also, let me just update my page here. You can still also go into this normal options, manage patterns like we did before. You'll see the synced patterns there too. So there's nothing to distinguish them. I'll just show you that there's nothing to distinguish here, which I think there should be, between synced or non-synced. But the thing about the synced pattern is, as I said, why would you do a synced pattern? Because in let me add a new page. Let's call this pattern test. I'm running out of names, pattern test 5 or something. And we're going to add our synced pattern. My patterns, here's our synced one. And let's publish. So at this point, this page has an instance of a synced pattern. So what does that mean? Well, one thing you notice is now I'm using this pattern. It doesn't show me the individual components here. It's all together in one group. But any place I use this pattern, if I go back and update this synced pattern, which I will in a second, it will be reflected on any pages. It'll be synced to any pages that use it. So let's go one more time. I'll just publish this. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to make a change to that synced pattern. So I'm going to go back to manage patterns again. Here's my synced pattern. And let's edit it. I'm going to remove the heading. So the heading is now gone. I'm going to delete it, update that, and now it's just a button. Looks kind of silly. But any pages that used it, like the page I had just created, which was what, pattern test 5 or some weird thing like that. Oh, it's on my second page, sorry. Pattern test 5. When I go in here and look at this, it's gone. So it's been synced. So that's kind of the magic of why you would want to use the synced patterns. Again, it keeps it, any instance of it keeps it in sync, but it also takes some control out of the hands of people. And I'm going to try in 2 minutes to show the latest one that's coming out. But first, let's go back real quick to the manage thing. So some other things you can do with patterns, as I said. Here's where some really neat stuff happens. You can export these as a file. You can export them as JSON files. So that means that you can then download them, use them in on other sites. You can also duplicate them. But let me show just one thing too about, so this is, again, I'm using the old classic theme 2021. If you're using a theme that has full site editing enabled, like the 2024, let me activate that. as I said, in the full site editing theme, one thing that should disappear, is the customizer. Well, again, I'm using the beta, so your mileage may vary, but you have the full site editor experience. So if people who haven't played with full site editing, this is something that's kind of coming-ish in the future for potentially other parts of WordPress. But now in here, I do have patterns as well. So I can actually look at patterns and edit them this way too. So there's my synced patterns. The nice thing here is I can tell this is actually a synced pattern. Here's the other patterns. As I mentioned before, this 2024 theme comes with some built-in patterns. So for example, a gallery. If I want to, let's say I want to use this gallery, I can definitely use this gallery pattern in my pages, but let's say I want to modify this a little bit, or the project layout's probably a better example. I can't edit this because it's a pattern that came from a theme. It has a lock on it. What I can do though is I can duplicate it and then edit this thing. So that's how you kind of get around it. One last quick thing is this thing that's coming in WordPress 6.5. We'll talk about this a lot more, I think, next month when we get to 6.5, but this was the idea of having overrides. To me, this is a really neat thing. So I think I've created one, so hopefully I can save us a little bit of time here. That is this guy. So I created this, I have WordPress 6.5 beta installed, so that's how I could do this. This synced pattern, what's cool about it is, again, from all intents and purposes, right now, it just looks like a regular old pattern, but in WordPress 6.5, you'll have the option on the different elements or blocks in here to decide whether or not to allow people to change them. So for example, here on the button, under the Advanced tab, allow instance overrides, I've set that. And same with this image, I've set that too, to say, okay, anyone who uses this pattern, you're stuck with everything else I've built, but these two parts, the button and the image, you can override them. So let's see real quick what that looks like in real life. And then I'll shut up too, because in case there's any questions, but 1 second. So if I create a page, let me add a new page, just to make it easier. I'll say blast, oops, get out of here. Blast pattern test. And now I'm gonna add that pattern that's synced with overrides. So in this case, it was this guy. So when I add this pattern, what it looks like over here is, it kind of looks like a regular old synced pattern. Big difference is these two things now are exposed to me. So the image, for example, I can say, oh, okay, I don't want this image, I want to replace it. So I can click replace, I can change it to, let me just something real quick here, the cat, if lots of cats on this page. And my window is blocking this, so maybe there's there we can select. So there we go. So there is some level of variability, some level of overriding that you can do. So that's how you create patterns in a nutshell. There's a lot more I can show in terms of the details behind it if we have time after or people have interest, but for the sake of time, Peter, I'm going to, unless any questions in the chat before I.
Yeah, there were a couple. So,
Okay.
but you kind of showed it again, and Doug, you can let us know if you need clarity, because when you did your second demo, that looking at a synced versus an unsynced, that the purple double diamond highlight is sort of the indicator that something is a synced pattern. I also put a link in to our, I'm going to try to start building out a snippet page now for those who use code snippets, and maybe turn some of them even into little kind of our own little group plugins that allows the admin look at your list of block patterns on classic themes. You can do that by drilling into the editor on a block theme, and then when you look at all of them, it'll give you that list that you were showing, Ray, and you had the link to it.
Yep.
The snippet that I'm sharing adds that list to the appearance menu, so it's kind of always there.
You're right, because the menu is there. It's just one of those. It's not an easy thing to get to immediately from old classic themes.
The snippet does nothing more than just add that to the menu. That it's not creating that link. It's just putting it into the menu. But it does make it easier. And interestingly, the one thing I was trying to do today that you can't do for reasons that ChatGPT and Perplexity couldn't explain to me is that I wanted to see in that list, I want to put a little flag to say which ones were synced and which ones were unsynced.
Well, that's coming. I think that's coming in the full site editing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just impatient for that because it seems to make a whole lot of sense.
It does.
We do have some overlap on it, and before I start, one of the things that I think would help is we're looking at the time and all this. I'm going to go through a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to kind of show the beginning parts of it, and then during when I'm talking and all, if there's anybody who wants to see one in depth. In other words, the ability to go through each and every last thing I'm going to show is not going to happen in the time we have. But for those that people are more interested in, let's get some feedback on that, and then we can. So I'll do a quick kind of superficial, and then let's see what people want to see more about. And then there's a question there, Ray. I'm not sure if you're looking at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about it too, as reminding us that the idea of block patterns is not nearly as complicated as it initially seems. It's so handy. It's just a matter of saving a bunch of blocks in its own block. So if you have a
no, and as you're going towards that next thing of finding them, using them, I think this is one of the not the advantages, but one thing I think WordPress in some ways was late to the party on. Again, like I said, other page builders, Divi, Elementor, others have kind of had this. And for anyone who's worked in another environment like a Wix or Squarespace, that's kind of a lot of what they do. It's like, oh, take this section, drop a whole section down. And that's been a real, I think, noticeably missing feature from WordPress. So I think Patterns helps address that. All right, so I stopped sharing, Peter, so you can share your.
Yeah, and the other thing about the overrides is it's almost going to feel a little bit like custom fields. That ability to be able to lock something in and have something as a variable, and then even tying into fields so that you could have a block that does have some dynamic capability that's sitting in a pattern. It'll work because ultimately, when it's dropped on a page, and it's just a block that does that thing. Okay, I assume you can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I kind of want to put this right at the beginning, kind of beginning, middle, and end of all our presentations. Right. The WordPress experience is defined by your theme, plugin, and custom code. WordPress environments can vary greatly. So, we're always trying to talk more about the concepts than anything specific, especially I'm not sure who ultimately made the call, made our meeting today that's new, but a lot of times with new folks, it can be confusing because following a tutorial that doesn't quite match what their environment is. There's a whole lot of reasons why that could be your theme, plugins, and custom code. All right, so Ray, you kind of touched on the design benefits of source patterns. That is patterns. When I say source, you're showing the making of any kind of pattern. Saving things gives you a number of benefits. So obviously the first one is delivering attractive designs even if you're not a designer. So that ability to call upon a community of designers who are giving or selling these design elements and these functional things that you can put on your website is really nice. Applying design consistency to your site by using patterns that are meant to work together. So having consistency, and I'd probably talk about it again a little bit later, but also, this all ties into your branding, customizing. I just mentioned a little bit later, but this idea of customizing any kind of pattern that you bring in to match your branding and then have that be consistent. Avoiding that blank page panic and to be inspired is really a nice way of why looking at the available patterns that are out there to say, oh, you know what, let me pull this and this and this. Wow, I'm so far along now. I'm just kind of tweaking things versus I'm staring at a blank page. I don't know what to do next. And I absolutely understand what that could be like. We've all been there. Getting page elements, fully designed pages, wireframe layouts, you can find things, whatever works for you and works for what you're trying to do. The wireframe layouts might be for people who are just trying to get that initial, how do I want to lay out a site? Or if you're a developer, that's how you think and operate. You don't have to go into a full design. You can get, more of a minimalist, boxes that you know that you have to fill in. Instead of putting images there, there's sort of that generic image, sort of that wireframe thing. Using patterns is one of the quickest ways to get going. In fact, patterns that are grouped as pages and then are used by some of the themes and block plugins that use what are called starter templates or starter sites. You could not only can you bring in a bunch of blocks for a page, it could do that for multiple pages, and with one click, you can have this, a very quickly have the beginnings of a full-blown website, fully designed. And block, to me, and I've mentioned this before, block patterns deliver what themes used to promise. That is, when you used to go look for a theme, you were very often, oh, I like the pictures and I like the color and I like kind of that layout. And then you got it and then it says, oh, it's nothing like that. Block patterns are actually giving you the design and the elements within. So to me, it's much closer than the way themes were before. Now, granted, if you're new, you've not been burdened with that world, but 5, 7, 10 years ago, and going to all these different theme houses, and they still exist. That's why we have so many themes in the repository that ultimately, I would argue that we need just a fraction of that because of things like block patterns. So we're going to talk about where to find design block patterns. And I'll get into the details of these, but WordPress.org, your themes, install block collections. Ray, you touched on the theme part, the third-party designers, and even AI-generated block pattern sources. So we're going to get into the details of these topics. So the first one is block patterns on WordPress.org. You can find that on WordPress.org under patterns. And by the way, is Laura still is on the call? Laura just released a training video on the whole WordPress.org kind of finding things kind of stuff. So that's, Laura, wherever you can put it in the notes. I think you're on YouTube, and this is where I found you. Saw that this morning. So very good. Thanks for that. And we should link to that to one of our previous meetups where we kind of talking about some of the basic, where do you find things and the admin menus and all. I'm just going to start. I'm going to do some of the kind of the live action demoing right here. But this idea that your patterns on WordPress.org are readily available, and you can link to them and just copy that pattern, go to your site. We'll do the full demo on some sites with what people are kind of looking for to learn. But copy this pattern, go to your site, paste it. This pattern will land there. Now, one thing about the .org repository is if you're signed in, you can have favorite patterns, and you can even create your own, which is really interesting. As a matter of fact, I will show you that. I don't think I favorited anything, but I'm logged in as myself. It's having a WordPress.org login, free, non-intrusive. But when you go to the site, you can do things like have favorite themes, favorite plugins, favorite patterns. So if I had some that I said, oh, I really like these, I could just, heart them, favorite them, and then just kind of call them up. So helps me filter things. But I can also create a new pattern. And in fact, I'm starting to do that. And this is made by me. I didn't have to do this just because I have my WordPress.org account. And what I'm going to build that ultimately share is something as simple as, for classic themes, when you go into a newer block theme like 2024, when you're going into the editor, there's a place where you have a style guide, style book, where it shows you basically how everything is going to look in that style. So I'm basically replicating that into a bunch of block patterns that then somebody could just bring in and call it up and say, I want a page with all of the styles there. So this is something I'm creating. So it's pretty neat. And, it's just one of the things you could do on .org. Filtering patterns by category, a curator, a community knows both. So that is, if we're looking at all patterns, you have the ability to, say, I'm looking for a gallery, right? But now I've got this smaller number because I'm under curated, and I'll be very honest. And maybe Laura, feel free to, if you know the answer to this, or anybody, what is curated versus community? I'm not sure. Other than the curated seem to be all developed by WordPress.org. Under community now, if we're looking under gallery, we're going to see a whole lot more. And these are all available patterns that you could say, boy, I really like this one. You could just click on the copy right from there, or go into the detail, look at it closer. You could copy that pattern, paste it on your site, and you will have this pattern. Now, what's also kind of neat is if you are looking at a pattern that you like, say this one, this person did it, you can also look to see if that person has any others. That person only has one. Where we hope that you get a little bit more, and what we'll see with some of the block patterns made by third parties and organizations that might have a plugin and all, is you might, if they have multiple patterns, what you'd like to see is some consistency between them. So now you start getting a family of patterns. You get that in 2024, for example. A lot of the block patterns naturally work together. They are complementary to each other. This person's patterns seem to go, there's a few variations of it, but that would be another thing. You can actually drill down to a specific designer if you like. So there's a lot of neat things that you could do right here from .org. What else do I want to say? So designer. And then all block patterns in the repository use core blocks. No plugins are needed. You don't have to worry about anything being turned off. What you will find with any of the plugins that you grab from different resources like WordPress.org, they're still theme dependent in that your theme will affect how they show up. Fonts, in some cases, colors, depending on how it's set up, if it's set up to use block variations. So there's there can be some variables. But definitely things like fonts, for example, will be, your theme will change what you might see on a .org based on what your theme is doing. Even though you paste it, you'll get the general thing. Another thing that you'll find the difference is are widths, for example, whether something is full width, wide width, or just the standard width. If something doesn't fit, and we'll talk about this too, all of these are tweakable. You would just adjust them to your design. But if you grab something like this and you brought it into another theme, even a classic theme like a Cadence or an Astra, or the tens of thousands that are on the, you could modify a block pattern that you bring in to work with what you're doing, with what your theme is doing. I noticed there was one where I took a 2024 block and then I put it into a Cadence theme. It works, but the difference was the 2024 theme had a global setting for the border radius on images, and the Cadence image block only had square or rounded. So that kind of went dramatically. You'd have to tweak that as opposed to it using. So you'll find these little variations and differences. So that's .org. The next thing that we can look at are the patterns that are included in themes. And the newer, and I call them quality block themes, often include their own patterns. It all depends on the amount of work and effort that the developer put into their theme. They might, some just reference, they have, when you go to your insert, you're just seeing the core, the themes, the patterns that are available on WordPress.org. You're just your interface on through the WordPress admin is just linking to those. There are themes that have put more effort into more of developing those. 2024, the core theme, one of the reasons why the new default theme people like it is it does have its own built-in patterns that have consistency. A few others that I like, Nev, full site editing one, Ollie, Powder, Raft, and a theme called Variations, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time on later. Variations is a new discovery for me. Very, very cool for a whole lot of reasons, and we'll get into that. But Variations has a whole lot of block themes that I can show you if it falls on the we're interested in seeing more list. So, you know, what's nice is the ones that are included in themes, again, allows that quicker creation of coherent, harmonious sites. You know, if 2024 has a bunch of things that are designed to work together, you bring them in, your site looks better right out of the gate because it's not a hodgepodge of things. It's things that are meant to work together. I mentioned the idea of a global style variations, working with the patterns. Classic themes can also include patterns, but are often use complementary plugins. And there's no set rule on any of these things. So you can load a classic theme. And when I say classic theme, a non-block theme, one that uses the customizer, for example. And those themes could have built-in block patterns as part of the package of the coding that comes over with the theme. A lot of times they'll deliver that in a plugin. You might load a theme, and you know, Astra's a great example of one. Cadence, where it's like, hey, thanks for loading the theme. You might want to get these other blocks, and we can look at those in a little bit. The complementary plugins is meaning. Did I use the right complementary here? That's my little pet peeve. Then I think I got it wrong. Anyway, so then the things like advanced themes with starter sites will require those plugins typically. And I can show you this idea of this load a theme, load a plugin, hit a button, get a whole site, and it may even load other plugins for you. So the next place to find patterns is in block collections and pattern plugins themselves. So there are plugins that can be independent of a theme that can be used to add block patterns. Some of them are built to work with specific themes, others independent, as I said. But one of the things to be very aware of when you add a plugin that has some block patterns, custom blocks and block patterns that might be built with those custom blocks, is anytime you use one of those block patterns that are using the custom block that comes with that plugin needs to remain active. If you deactivate or remove that plugin, that block pattern, those custom blocks, won't know how to be rendered. So unless it's a plugin that uses only core blocks, and there are a few that do that, you just have to keep that in mind. It's like, okay, that's a plugin I need to keep active. A lot of times there are free and premium versions. You know, again, Astra and Cadence are two examples of where they have a free model and a premium version, often offering more block patterns, more starter site examples, more functionality, more custom blocks. And then I mentioned that, again, if it's using core blocks, that plugin could be deactivated and removed. So some examples, and some of these I found kind of interesting. I didn't know to what level they were, especially because I haven't used the block themes so much. Give me just a sec. There is a very interesting plugin called Twentig. And if anyone's used it, I'd be very curious to know that. But what Twentig is designed to work with 2024, so customize 2024 or any block theme. While it's designed to work for it, it works well with any block theme. And what it does is it gives a whole lot of block patterns of a style that are all using core blocks. So it is this great little plugin that gives you a lot of design in these built-in block patterns for a free plugin that's on the repository. The link is right to here in their slides, and we can show that if people are interested. The Extendify is another very interesting plugin. And what's interesting about Extendify is they do have their premium model is very, very expensive because it's meant to be sold to hosting companies, so that a hosting company can offer their customers these great designs in their websites if you host with them. But a subset of that is available in this Extendify plugin that also uses core Gutenberg blocks to work with any theme to give a whole bunch of new design patterns. And again, we can whip any of these up when we're ready, but I thought this was a neat plugin too, in terms of being able to just get these core plugins patterns in a plugin that once you put things to your site, if you want to then turn off Extendify or Twente, you can, because it's just giving you those patterns to begin with. Once you place them, they're on your site. Now, if you want to save them as another pattern, if you want to tweak them, if you want to use other patterns, then there are things to do, whether it's keeping that plugin active or saving them as Ray showed earlier, the My Patterns kind of thing. Patterns WP, another a similar kind of plugin. This connects to a website, and the website is Patterns WP. And I'm going to show this because no, that's not the one. I remember this being. I think their link is the Patterns WP. So in the patterns, so basically the plugin is just an interface to a lot of these block patterns that they have on their site that you can take a look. A lot of times, similar to how you would look at WordPress.org that we showed, but these ideas and some minimalist styles that you can then tweak with your colors and images and things like that, and some more advanced. But this is another plugin that is giving you an easy way to link to what you can also go into their patterns library that's available on their website. So some pretty neat stuff. Then we have, and there's a plethora of these, but the ones that I tend to reference most often are cadence blocks. These are patterns based on custom blocks, the cadence blocks. And they're great with the cadence theme, but you don't have to use them in the cadence theme. Same with Spectra, which is the Astra custom blocks. Great with the Astra theme, not required. And both of them have, as part of that plugin, here's our custom blocks, but here's a whole lot of patterns that are well designed using the custom blocks. Then we get into third-party designers, developers, sites, other places to find things. Gutenberg Hub. This was first developed, and there's a premium version of this that he's working on. But when Gutenberg first came out, but what's kind of neat about this is, again, these are using core blocks, patterns that are out there that you can just grab, copy the code, paste it on your site. So that's Gutenberg Hub. I mentioned Patterns WP. Demosites.io works with the Nev theme, but also works with others. Nev, I mentioned the Nev full site editing, but there's also a classic version. That's by Theme Isle, and also kind of an unsung hero for a lot of people. Really good theme and a theme company that does a lot of work. And then we're going to spend a little bit more time on this Tyler.com, which ties to the variations theme that I showed earlier. Tyler.com has a number of block patterns that are beautiful right out of the gate, well designed. He talks about them being kind of vetted for effectiveness and all. And we'll talk about it a little bit. What's also there is you can then AI generate artificial intelligence and generate some of the wording and stuff that goes into these. So that is that next level AI generated patterns, where artificial intelligence is going to make those block patterns that want to get you further along now having language and images that really come closer to what you want, so that as you're, designing and prototyping and all, that you can have these block patterns that look even closer to what you want. If you're a woodworker who works on rustic chairs, you could say that, and then the wording and the patterns that you should tweak, you should replace anyway, but it's closer to what you want, what you ultimately want to create, use and create. This is where I'm saying that content and AI generated patterns, just like any of the patterns, should still be edited. And I don't know if we've made this clear, but I don't think I did, but with the patterns that are generated by these designers, you're bringing them into a site, and then you're going to edit them, because a lot of the language is not going to be yours. It's going to be, in the images, you're not going to use those images. They're basically placeholders, but they give you a good idea. You're a lot closer to that final product. So you should always keep in mind that you might see a layout that looks really good to you, and it's all about yoga, and you're a woodworker, but you won't like that layout. You're just replacing the words to talk about woodworking and the images to show woodworking over that yoga pattern that comes over. They have to put kind of default content in a pattern to, give you something that you then are tweaking. AI is giving you something closer, especially when you're quickly prototyping something, and you can, tell it that, your color scheme is in greens and it's nature and things like that. And your images are now more in tune to that. And it goes to, for example, cadence blocks and the cadence starter sites that use AI go out to pixels, I think, and it does searches based on the criteria that you give through artificial intelligence. So sources for using AI are ZipWP, which is I think co-owned with the folks that have Astra. So some of the stuff that they include in their free generation, and then there's paid levels, might use Astra themes and all, but you can build a site. We can demo that very quickly. Again, cadence blocks and cadence starter sites were now very recently artificial intelligence was put in. So when you're going to create a block, it's like, would you tell me what you're looking for in terms of your business colors, whatever, and then those patterns are modified based on what you're asking the AI to deal with. The starter site's working with the cadence theme, and then the Tyler.com site that works for creating patterns using AI or not, and then with the variations block theme or not, which is great, and it's all core blocks, which is what's really great. So then, kind of said it before, saying it again here, building with pre-designed patterns. We're keeping in mind patterns are stacked group of blocks and insert just like blocks. So think of it a big row. We may have many rows in it, but a big group. Here's a pattern, here's a pattern, here's a pattern. Maybe you have stuff in between. You have a post where it's all content and there's one pattern you want to put in the middle. Because when we talk about putting a lot of patterns in, a lot of times you're talking about doing a page design. A post might have a certain kind of pattern that you use selectively, but with consistency. Maybe it is a full width band with a quote pulled out of it and an image that you really like, and you can, instead of redoing it each time, it's either saved as a pattern or you find a pattern that you like. Once placed, that the patterns are editable, content is placeholders, as we've been saying, but it's important to keep that concept in mind. And don't feel limited to the pattern's design, because while you're probably picking it because of the design, once it's on your site, now you can subtract, add, move, put another row in, remove a column. Maybe it's got 4 columns and you want 3. You're not, unless it's a synced pattern, which is tied to like one thing, one kind of source of truth, if you will, for that pattern, you have control of it. In fact, after you tweak it, you might want to save it as your own, using the method that Ray showed earlier, where now you're like, okay, I had a starting point, I've now tweaked it, Now I'm going to save it as my own pattern. I can use it in other places of my site. And then, as I said, using patterns to design full pages or enhance posts, the sky's the limit. They are just basically super blocks, if you will. All right. Did anybody want to see anything specifically, looking at the time and looking at,
I'd say do a quick one, Peter, of maybe like the Tyler.com. I think is a great example of, insert into a blank page something from there and just kind of show, how you would do that.
Yep.
Joanne says Astra AI, so she likes to see Astra AI.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to a website that I kind of use for playing with this, Experiment Press, which is me. And then I'm going to go to my themes here. And just for fun, I'm going to go to the variations theme, and I'm going to activate that. And now on the front end, and I'll show you how you're not tied into this, but on the front end, there's not a whole lot of difference because I haven't really styled a whole lot with that, with this theme. It's kind of basic until I do something differently. Let me just kind of shorthand. I'm going to go to all pages, and I'm going to add a new page, and I'm going to call it variations patterns. I'm just setting variations. I'm just kind of setting the stage. So now let me go to Tyler.com. That's his name. This is something that I was playing with, but let's put in, these are all the different types of patterns that you can grab. He's got them defined by kind of category. So if you're looking at dolphin, you can look at, all the different things. And this is where it's kind of cool. When you go into it, you're immediately saying, hey, do you want to grab the entire page? So copy the entire page. Or as you're looking through this layout, you might say, what he's done is he's basically presented all the patterns as a page, so you can grab them all together, or you can say, you know what, I just want how may I assist you block, because it's just, or I like this block, or pattern, and so on. So if you go back to, so we'll do it first, like say you like this layout, and you can even go into, they're full-blown sites where it's all the patterns are presented. It's so cool. Are presented as a site that you can just grab page after page if you want, or again, each piece. So let's go to this, and maybe if I just grab this section. So I copied the section. That's all I did is click copy. Now I'm going to come here and I'm going to paste it, and I've just simply pasted in what was on that pattern that was in this page of patterns that's on Tyler.com onto my site. Now I could have grabbed everything and just pasted everything there. I could, and again, the beauty here, you look at each one, this is all the elements of the pattern. This is the pattern here, and this is, they're just core blocks. Now it's adopting the fonts and the variation color, because this is, variations is a block theme, so it is using global style variations and things like that. But just that quickly, I've got this kind of layout that I like, and I can keep building out from there. So now if we go back to the front, maybe I'm going to say, change this, and let's take the, we'll give it a name.
Peter, before you go too far, can I just point out, tying this back to what I showed earlier, if you go back to your site for a second, this is almost an example of that unsynced or non-synced pattern, because at this point, this actually is not on the site Peter is creating. This is not actually a pattern, right? It was, you copied over the layout pieces. But at this point, if you looked in the patterns directory on this site, you wouldn't see that pattern unless he saved it as a pattern, if that makes any sense, right? So at this point,
That's right.
you've taken the stamp from Tyler.com, stamped it here,
Right.
but if you wanted to reuse this now on your site, the way you currently had it is you would have to keep going to Tyler and copying it, or if you can create it as a pattern now for yourself, especially after you've modified it. I just want to point that out.
Say I modify and change. Maybe I wanted to put some subtext below here, something to that effect, and go, oh, now this is for me for this site. And then just as you said, I can grab that whole group, create the pattern, and now it would be saved as a pattern locally. But yeah, I mean, there's a certain elegant simplicity to block patterns, which is basically you're just copying and pasting a whole bunch of blocks grouped together a certain way. That's ultimately what it is. And then there's the different factors that we put into it. Is a furniture, is a handmade furniture. I'm just putting in. Should I go so far as Adirondack? How do you spell it?
You would spell.
That's not. How do you spell Adirondack?
Adirondack. There you go. Cheers.
I'll see if it goes. So now I'm just gonna hit go on that. Oh, let's give it a let's find nature. And see, now it's giving me kind of woodworking images, and it goes through a process. I think it's thinking here, and then when you come back to it, like the language will be changed or modified. See how that was, instead of like a mountain, now it's woodworking and so on. And a lot of times the services will be like, this is now talking about generate content. I think that's what I have to do. There we go. I have to hit the generate content on it. So it's literally going through each block using artificial intelligence, right? Isn't this crazy?
And this is all free so far, right?
It's free. He has, you know what his thing seems to be, and I'll put his YouTube video in. He does these annual training videos, and one of the things that he's clearly doing, and I thank him, but he's saying, okay, here's how to start a website, and he includes the whole how to set up hosting. So he's clearly getting affiliate hosting money, which can be quite nice.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for this. I mean, look, Brace graphic.
Amazing.
Isn't this amazing? It's just so something. And again, I can now if I want to copy the entire page and I want to come back over to my experiment press. Let me go to the dashboard. Let me go to pages, all pages. Add new one. Let's just pretend it's going to be my home page. Oop. Home keys. And now if I paste all of that content has come over. You could see all of these things. And yeah, so pretty neat, pretty wild, pretty quick way to you can go out and prototype something. Now you would want to
mind blown. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Anybody? What do you think?
That looks great. So is it, so Joanna originally asked Astra AI. So is Astra AI similar to this, but within the Astra theme, I would assume, right? Like I saw the Cadence one is more, it's like built into the Cadence.
Well, I know. So one of the things that they're kind of banking on is ZipWP.
Oh, right.
And then if we go to create a new, you can do a complete website and say you're doing I don't know. It's always hard to start an organization. Oh, I think this is the name of the company. So we'll call it Helping Hands. And then you'd really want to spend some time. So what is helping you describe your, then, okay, so now it's like, okay, so what images appeal to you? And you could skip this, you could pick specific images. Let's see what happens if we just skip it. Oh, it picked them all. I'm going to skip this. This is like if you're literally building, and now we start getting AI generated. And when you go into these, I think, let's see if we like, we'll just pick the first one. We don't have to overthink this. This is where it starts adding extra plugins, for example, which is one of the models that you're going to have with AI, which is like, oh, use our plug, start building the website. And how this relates to patterns is it's basically they've got this library of patterns. They put them together in these page layouts, and then they have variables set up on their side for where the artificial intelligence is going to kick in. But the concept behind all the ways that we're working with this stuff is the same. Here's a block pattern or a number of block patterns that are together as a layout. As a human, I'm going to go in and edit and tweak those, putting in my own images and putting in my own text. In the case of some of these AI tools, we're just kind of hyper speeding some of that process by letting the tools go in. And the more descriptive you get, the better ultimate results you're going to get close to. The zip WP model, I can't remember if it's part of it's going to be with the premium. It's going to be generating things like, say you want to do it for clients and giving you a premium model where you get more sites. It's also a number of these things, again, tie into hosting, because the one thing about hosting, it's recurring revenue. We'll come back to this in a little bit. It's at 72%. As far as cadence, and we can do this, here, we'll use this real quick. Remind everybody, playground.wordpress.net, a great place to experiment and play. I'll show you. Well, we're starting with the 2024 as a default. I'm going to go to the first thing I'm going to do. Always remember to do this. Go to the top right and then click network access and apply changes to your free, only in the browser. Once you close the browser, it's gone. There's things you can do, but just for all intents and purposes, that's what we're doing right now. But now this is an active WordPress site that I'm using as a playground. I'm already using the 2024 theme built in. So if I go to the pages, and let's say I'm going to add a new page. We'll come back to zip in a second. And maybe this is, nope. 2024 has built into it where it brings up the patterns as a default. That is something that you can do. So again, to help you jumpstart your layouts, again, this is actually not only as a pattern, but it's a number of patterns delivered as a layout kind of thing. I'm gonna skip that for now, and I just want to show what it looks like if you go to the inserter, go to patterns, then explore the patterns. This is looking at all the patterns that are part of 2024, which include ones that come with 2024. And then as we scroll down or keep moving, we'll eventually find the ones that are on WordPress.org. Right. So these are like WordPress.org. But so that's kind of where it starts from. So let me go to, again, we're lightning rounding this. Let me go to plugins. Again, I'm on Playground. I'm going to add a new plugin. I'm going to add Twentig. Very cool plugin. I'm going to install it. I'm going to activate it. So now, if I refresh this, let me make sure. I'm going to close this because I'm not 100% sure how Playground works with multiple windows. So now if I go to all pages, add a new page. Insert patterns. And what you'll find is the number of patterns available goes from like 68 to like 300.
Wow.
And there are some that look the same, and I know they're in specific groups.
Yeah, those look like logos and clients. I don't think those are in the regular 2020.
Those aren't in the regular one, right? So now the 20 is giving you, in this case, these are more wireframe ones. They also have some that are more designed. Yeah, I know I'm looking at it when I see the sand dune image. They use the same image, but these are all now added just because of that plugin. But if I put this, say I like this, and I put it on my site, all I did was click to insert, and again, going to my list view, they're just all core blocks. So if you and Twentig, while it's kind of like it goes hand in hand with 2024, it does work with pretty much all block themes. Let's go.
This one's an example too of if you turned off that plugin because they're core blocks, you still get that pattern if you saved it yourself.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I'll go to plugins.
Quick question came up about the libraries and the generated things. Have any of them been vetted for accessibility of the stuff they offer? And I guess I'll let you answer that, Peter, but in terms of the core block ones will have the same accessibility features that WordPress core blocks offer. So those at least, yeah, they don't come. Do you agree with that? Or is there anything else you can think of for accessibility?
No, that's it. So as good or not good as any block package is, and that's again where I know the ones I fall on, but one of the reasons why I like Cadence and Astra is they pay attention to accessibility. So even if you're using a Cadence blocks plugin, which we can do, or a starter site Cadence theme and plugin, which we could do, and then you're using all the patterns based on those, they will be as accessible as the blocks that they use, and the blocks created by Cadence, they pay attention. 100% perfect. They're working on it far better than many, that's for sure. I use them with a definite level of confidence, especially on the theme and what they've done with things like menus and stuff like that. Reminding ourselves we were on ZipWP. Now I'm just going to go to the site. It's created this, big old URL, but remember I told it helping hands, helping people with accessibility needs. And again, it's built to site. And you get into a level of customizing. You can decide on what colors, you want, that type of thing. And then if we save it, and if I go back to my dashboard and my pages, there'll be these created pages that are using the AI. I'm not sure what this image is that it's missed, but this was all part of Michigan More Inclusive World for All. This is all created by AI.
Can you edit this page for a second, Peter? So I'm curious too, back to our thing that we just said, it's like, I assume these are all just core blocks that it's used.
Let's take a look. So they may be using, because they're tied in with Astra. Let's see.
Yeah, they look like, oh.
Yeah, they're using.
That's an Astra thing, yeah.
Right. So that's what you have to keep in mind. So let's see what plugins are coming.
Or appearance theme, go to appearance theme, that should show also.
So they're using Spectra. Spectra is the plugin, Astra as the theme. Yeah. But here's another thing. What I've been playing with over the last few days with this is I've gone out, you could go over to, Playground, make something, copy that and put it into another site.
That's what I was going to say. The other thing you can do, you can install a plugin and export this whole thing.
That's right. You can, because ultimately you have blocks that are packaged together. That's a block pattern. then you can move. And in a lot of cases, you don't have to go through the importing and exporting are all about putting them into your block theme library.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, just pasting works. There's some quirks with some of them. For example, I was showing that Gutenberg Hub site. It was in my notes somewhere.
Right there.
Gutenberg Hub. He does a little bit different. I'm not 100% sure why, but if you're looking at something here, you copy the code, and then I believe he's got instructions that say paste it in one of them. And forgive me, I've looked at so many. It says paste it in an HTML block and then convert to blocks. I'm not sure if it's this one now that I look at it, because I know this is just copy code. What's also kind of neat about this one is it's sort of an interesting page builder in that you can, as you add these, you're stacking them, and then you can then download them all at once.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Again, all about the concept of just blocks in a package, put a bunch together. Now you have a layout, bring it to a site, tweak it. Just paying attention to what it depends on. Does it depend on a block plugin? Does it depend on a theme layout or variation? So
I was going to say, Peter, so for the sake of time, why don't you keep sharing? But so I took everyone off of mute. So if anyone wants to unmute yourselves and either ask a question about anything we've presented tonight, feel free.
Or anything.
Yeah, ask away. No, the ones in the chat, we pretty much covered. The one I think that I know you had covered, but just to sort of reiterate, it was there was a question about interaction. Yeah, so Jay Siga asked, are block patterns style only, or could they include interaction? I would say the one caveat on that is, and I think you've already touched upon this too. So let's stick with the WordPress core blocks, for example. Yeah. If somebody has written custom CSS or custom JavaScript, things like that, it's just like we talked about the plugin thing. Like if you export that block or that pattern to another site, you need that correspond. That stuff doesn't always drag along with it. So any variations that have been made on a site level, whether it's the theme or another developer put in some custom CSS styling or custom JavaScript running that does some interaction with that block, that's the one piece to be aware of. So
right.
Yeah, if anyone has a question about this or anything else too, I mean, just feel free to chime in. Otherwise, we'll keep flying around.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to, when we did that session. Now it's been 2 years, Peter. The session, let's build a site together.
Oh boy.
I think when we did that, again, maybe this is how we revisit in the future. We built that site basically from scratch, using the Cadence theme. I don't know if we really even used any of the starter templates there, but it would be interesting now with these tools that were not available just 2 years ago. I mean, that's the thing, we talk about how quickly time changes in the web world. You really could build things quite differently, as starting points too. I think that's the thing too. A lot of this stuff, it's just like that you said with those themes people could purchase from Theme Forest, whatever. There's nothing that's ever going to 100% meet your specific needs. I think the trick is you become a better developer and designer is finding those parts that are good enough. And it may not all be on one theme or one site or one set of templates, but finding things that are good enough, pulling them in and then doing the tweaking. At least that usually gets you at least more than 50% of the way, I think, to like good designs.
Right. This was the only reason I'm kind of doing this in the background is this is AI generated content for a blog post. I would not write it style. I to write basically about how WordPress patterns can speed design, encourage design consistency, and fill creative gaps. This was basically my Chat GPT or Perplexity or both um, prompt, and I told it 2,000 words, and I said, make it scannable and use, so this is what I got. So of course, if you're writing your blog posts and all, and you've just, oops. All right, this is with this theme. I can't remember what I left active. I'll have to double check that. But this is how that blog post would appear just in the words, with this theme set up for this. But say I want to, go in here and insert a pattern. I guess I'm going to find out what I have active. Oh, I have its variations, and they're about the island might not be the right thing, but this might be, again, the thing that while I have a blog post, I can go to patterns, and while I'm not laying out a whole page, there might be something I am enhancing on that page. This is a bad example.
And you could swap that out to an image instead, or swap it out eventually to like the featured image of the blog post or something.
Exactly. But you might get a layout that looks, so this is whereas in pages, you're treating it like, a page builder, right? So when an Elementor, a Beaver builder, a Divi, when you're doing posts, typically in a post, you're writing your content, you're putting your image, you're not going to do all of that embellishment, but you may want to have some. And then if you have something that you like, again, maybe it's this is, let me just get rid of this. I don't know if I have one in this particular library. You can go either WordPress.org and grab something, because this is just using core blocks. But if I went to patterns and I went to, let's see, what looks like it would be good.
Or like text, maybe there's probably something in the, I'm not sure if you're looking for like a quote block or something like that. Or
actually, see, it's funny because it's mixing and matching.
Yeah.
This happens a lot, right? There are themes sometimes with themes that it'll say, I'm only going to show you mine versus all of them. But say, yeah. Well, here's a good example. Say you like this, but I just pasted this in. This is probably better. Boom. So I grabbed that. So now, but that block pattern has actually got, even though it was one, it has these two things. This is, again, where once you have it, you can do what you want with it. I'm going to get rid of both of them, because then I just saw another one, this pattern here. Interestingly, the options on this, it's using small font. So say I wanted to have this, and then now I'm going to go to this image and I'm going to replace it with I don't know, this guy here, and this bit here, maybe I'm call this, right? So this might be welcome to the real world, but I like this column with the gray, whatever reason that I might have liked this pattern. That's grabbing the pattern and embellishing it. Now maybe I say, hey, after doing that work, I really want to use this more often. I can go select this whole thing. And even though this is not in a group, what I would typically do is I would group it. And then from there, and you could also rename it, right? So we can call this our quote pattern just here, so I can see it in my list view. And then from here, I could say, just as you showed before, create a pattern. And getting used to, there's other things too, where you might, it's with the my pattern, it's okay because it lands in a certain place, but you might say, again, quote image, and I don't know, I guess the category, let's just say I want it as banner. You can put it in multiple categories. It's not synced, create. So now it's in there, just as you did. I'm going to update this, make sure by refreshing the page that I've got whatever the latest. And then, so I was up here, and after this, I wanted to go enter, go to insert, go to patterns, go to my patterns. Now there's just what we did. Now this is my tweaked one. Pop that in. there it is. And now I might change this image to something different. But again, now I have consistency, and I'm going to, while this is not a good example, it's the concept behind. I took a pattern that exists, I tweaked it, I saved it as my own. Now I can use it multiple places, but I don't want to have it be synced with everything because I'm going to use the layout design. But over here, I want to put a different image in. I want to replace it with these people or whatever.
There are no questions that pop up yet in chat. So one thing, maybe if you don't mind driving, Peter, because is the theme you're using on this experiment, is this a full site editing theme? Is it a block enabled one?
Right now?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Yep, it is. Because you go under appearance, I believe. I think.
Yep.
Right. Can you go to appearance editor?
Yeah, yeah, it is, and you'll see. But now this is where the theme also added starter template.
I'm sorry, using the variation.
I'm using variations, which is a block theme. If I go to editor.
So what I was, the quick thing, you don't have to show this, but just this idea again of patterns that, where patterns are powerful is we were showing them on pages and posts. Well, you showed them on posts, but you can also insert patterns into your footers and headers and things like that too. So that's just another thing to consider too. It's like, again, if you're using a full site editing theme, again, they're blocks. That's the nice thing about it. Anywhere you can use blocks, you can use these patterns, which is really cool.
Right. It's blocks inside of things. A bunch of blocks inside of a group that's saved as a block pattern.
All blocks.
Put that inside of a right. It's again, you get to this concept of how things are working, and it's not too crazy. Yeah, header and footer.
Well, I know we threw a lot of resources at people. We threw a lot of I'm just gonna grab the thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we threw a lot of resources at you, which we always do. So remember, you can always go to hartfordwp.com. I'm going to send out the recording tomorrow sometime with the video in case you want to go back and watch anything. I also put a couple links to, again, I want to give credit where credit's due, is Carolina Nymark. I'm not sure if you ever went to this site, the fullsiteediting.com. I'll give her a plug, but excellent resource for learning about what's happening in full site editing. She had a fantastic article all about the patterns and synced patterns. So I heavily leverage that for inspiration. Again, so I want to give credit where credit's due. Go check that site out. A lot of good in-depth information, stuff you don't normally find in just the WordPress.org documentation. Like I said, exciting things coming too with patterns. So hopefully in 6.5, we'll talk a bit more about those patterns with overrides, because to me, that's kind of the missing piece. And in fact, I will say, even in terms of what I've done with whatever it's called in like a page builder like Divi, they don't even offer something like that ability to really create a pattern and have parts that can be overridden or replaced, the placeholder. So to me, that's really exciting, because I think that's something kind of unique that really could maybe help, encourage adoption of more patterns. So, it's back to like what we talked about. I think the tools are out there. Things are getting easier in a lot of ways for developers, but you still need the developer know-how, I think, or you need some guidance in terms of, just think about, you can't just throw all these things together and have sites look good. You still need some consistency to them. I think that's where themes are helping to, as you showed, bundle together patterns. I want to show that real quick if people don't mind, just 1 second. So on the themes themselves, like this, I just loaded File Manager. So I'm using that 2024 theme. As I said, there's now a folder underneath the themes that implement patterns. So if you look at the 2024, if people have looked at the file system before, there's a patterns folder, and all those patterns, I think there's like 40 of them come with, maybe it's 56 that come with it. What's neat though is you can actually look at these things too. So let's just, I don't know, this is the call to action pricing table pattern, I guess. I'll just want to preview it. So that's all it is, just code. I mean, this is really neat too. You can see what's made up of that, and behind the scenes, this is all everything is. So again, what's very neat is you're getting this rich set of layouts available to you. So as a developer, or somebody working on websites, I think the skill set, just like we talked with AI, the skill set is really figuring out how to fit these things together. So lots of resources. Go check out the slides again from tonight. Go back to them afterwards. There's a lot of great stuff to play around with. Like I said, I'll send out the links to the recording tomorrow. Always let us know too what else you're interested in. Like I said, we're probably going to do WordPress 6.5 next month because I think there's a lot coming in that. If there's anything else we talked about today that you like us can dive deeper into, anything we missed, that you'd like to share in terms of things that you use to build up, to speed up your website development process, let us know too. We'd be happy to talk more about that next time. So anything else, Peter? Any parting thoughts?
No, I put the links in. I encourage people to experiment. I mean, part of the learning process of this was, oh, let's see how they do it. And did they use core blocks? Let me open up another playground link. So I put the playground links in there. The link to our site that links to this presentation. I even put in the YouTube video for how I discovered Tyler.com. But
Tyler.com to me alone, that's worth the price of admission tonight. I think it's amazing. It's like this guy.
And it's like hidden under a bushel, as they say. Although he's got a lot of views on it, so I think he's been around for a long time putting out videos. Came up in my YouTube feed, and then it was like,
yeah.
Logan has a question. I think we have one question. Right.
It's a clap. It's a applause.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, I wasn't sure if the hand wave. Yeah.
Thank you, Logan. Well, thanks everyone again for joining us tonight. We hope to see you again next month. And like I said, any questions, feel free to reach out to Peter or myself. And everyone have a good rest of your night and take care. Hope to see you next month. See you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.